So hi everybody, and welcome so much to our webinar here at Computas. Today we would like to focus on Anthos. So my name is Jon Gunnar Olsen, and I'm heading the Danish office of Computas. And I would just like to share a few words before we start the Anthos presentations. Computas was established already back in 1985 as the first AI company in Norway, and since then AI and ML has been a part of our DNA. And obviously, access to nearly unlimited compute power, vast amounts of data, and the amazing technology that has been provided by public platforms, cloud platforms such as Google Cloud, has accelerated innovation and the use of ML in the recent years. Obviously, the access. However, innovation is also about unlocking the constraints that many organizations experience in their current infrastructure, on-premise solutions, and yes, even mindset. Constraints that often hampers innovation and much needed change. Computas is an innovation partner in digital transformation, and we know that application modernization is hard. So getting back to Anthos, from a commercial point of view, Anthos is all about unlocking the potential in enterprise innovation and helping customers focusing more on product development rather than operations. For example, just take a look at the situation today. Many of us are using cloud-based collaborative tools to communicate and cooperate in difficult times. So the possibility to do this is a result of innovation at scale. Imagine if enterprises to a larger degree can take part in such innovation. Anthos can help you capitalize on your current on-premise solutions and at the same time get the benefits from amazing cloud technology. Anthos also helps avoid future vendor lock-ins, giving you the flexibility to use other public cloud vendors at ease and also optimize both operations and development. As you can see here, Computas is a strong Google partner in the Nordics. And we have, over the last 4 or 5 years, accumulated strong knowledge base and experience with a wide range of engagements, involving many GCP tools, including Anthos, of course. So, without much further ado, I would like to give the word to my very good colleagues, Janus, Rustam, Michael, who will share their insight on Anthos. And we are, of course, more than happy to continue the dialogue with you afterwards if you find it interesting. So thank you for listening in, and I hope you will enjoy the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Jon Gunnar. Hi, my name is Michael Kveller. I and my colleagues Rustam, Michael, and Janus will talk to you about Anthos and its value in the modernization process. We're also lucky to have Alejandro Montenegro, app modernization lead at Google, with us on this call. Anthos is a huge topic, and we won't be able to cover all of it. This webinar is our current take on it. We have picked topics that we personally think are exciting, interesting, and relevant here. They include business and value aspects, technical treats, insights, and some of our experiences with Anthos so far. We hope that this can help you to evaluate whether Anthos can fit into your technology strategy. Please submit any question in Q&A. They will be answered at the end of this presentation. We recommend you to use full screen mode. We also want to mention that this webinar will be recorded and we will send it to you later today. There are about 30 participants here now. The needs and desired quality attributes of modern IT have been discussed at length in recent years, especially with the emergence of DevOps. They are, of course, known to all of us, and some of them are listed here. High speed is absolutely essential. Relevant parameters include time to market, lead time, deployment frequency, and the ability to scale services up and down within seconds. At the same time, we require agility, for instance, to be able to build once and run anywhere, spending less time managing our applications, and ease of migration to the cloud. Reliability means, for instance, website availability, uptime and performance, data throughput, and storage durability. Of course, we cannot compromise on security and compliance. We have to protect our data in a zero trust environment and take care of data locality and sovereignty requirements. Finally, there is a desire to avoid vendor lock-in as much as possible. One measure is to build on a software stack based on open software. open source software. These are some properties of the desired target architecture, and the way to get there is of course part of a modernization process. The question is, how can we get there as quickly as possible? Which of the many tools that can help us should we choose? How can we handle gradual migrations, big bang migrations, and greenfield projects in a uniform way? Complementary, as developers, operators, site reliability engineers, and security engineers, we like to be in control, have full overview, and get continuous feedback on everything worth measuring. We want to continuously know the state of health of all of our IT components. If something is amiss, we'd like to get relevant and actionable notifications. All of this has to happen in a timely fashion. The crucial question is, how can we get there without having to implement all of the underlying and necessary functionality ourselves? Speed is the central parameter and enabler. We don't want to be fast just for the sake of it. We want to be fast in order to be able to change and adapt fast. At the same time, we cannot give up on quality and security. However, if we are fast, then we can quickly improve quality and security if needed. Now, in the process of modernization of the IT landscape, we will encounter many different commercial and technical challenges and drivers. Here are some of them. You desire to avoid vendor and platform lock-in in order to leverage best suited services provided by different vendors and optimize costs. Due to regulatory requirements, you need to keep some of your data on premises, but can and wish to access from the cloud. You would like to use the cloud as a development and test environment, but need to deploy the services on premises in order to satisfy legal compliance. Or you would like to introduce a uniform and consistent way of development and operations in order to reduce toil and cognitive load for your teams. You maybe meet a complicated and distributed landscape, organically grown over time, and you realize no one has the necessary overview. How can you conduct a gradual and seamless modernization with both short-term benefits and at the same time laying a stable foundation for the long-term development? Serverless architecture means that developers and operators need to care even less about infrastructure, and you would like to make this available for on-premises solutions as well. And very importantly, with the growing complicatedness of architecture based on microservices, you need to make sure that the security best practices are followed, and crucially, that also security scales easily. With this, I hand over to Rustam for an introduction to and overview of Anthos.
Thank you very much. So let's have a look how, because we've heard about the drivers, the challenges, and all the other things. So let's have a look now how the Anthos, the whole Anthos thing fits into that picture. So I would really like to start with the quote from Google that we'll see in a next slide. And I think that quote really well describes the kind of the future that we, and well, Google also sees in like a near future that we'll be seeing. And so the quote is, the future of applications and the infrastructure that they run on is created with containerized microservices managed through a declarative system with a single control experience that uses a service mesh that spans across all application locations. What does it actually mean? There's a lot of words here, but I think it has quite a few important words here that are highlighted with the different colors. So containers, microservices, declarative systems, single control experience, a service mesh, and this thing about spanning across the different application locations, whether it's cloud or on-prem and all the other things. And we will be looking at those different pieces of that in a second. And I also think that Anthos fits really well into this vision. It kind of plays really well with this vision as well. So if we have a look at the kind of the overview of what Anthos really is on a very, very high level, that we'll see that Anthos is providing a lot of things that you would typically see in a normal cloud platform nowadays. You kind of would expect to see to some extent. Things like marketplace, serverless experience, service management, orchestration, config and policy management, operation management, things like that. But there is a but here, and that is that happens across not only on specific cloud, in this case Google Cloud, but also across the other cloud solutions, and also on-premises solutions, also some kind of edge, also private clouds and things like that. And that is a pretty cool thing, that you can actually see that it gives you this experience across the other things. So you can kind of seamlessly move around and, well, deploy applications wherever it fits you best. If we look at the next slide again, we'll see here a bit different view of Anthos. It's not really, I don't really expect you to read all the bits and pieces, but I put it there so you can actually see kind of the stack of the whole thing. And here, I think it's important to mention that Anthos is not really a product. It's not a piece of software as like one piece of software. It's actually a stack of different products and different mostly open source products, and that are put together to play well together to give you this experience. And here you'll see that at the bottom there, you may say that you have kind of containers all the way down. So at the bottom there, you have containers running on any kind of cloud or whatever. On top of that, you would typically have Anthos GKE, so the Kubernetes cluster, Kubernetes engine that is controlling all of those. And on top of that, you would have lots of things that make your life much easier to move around between different clouds. Things like a service mesh, so typically an Istio with some extra stuff, or based on Istio. Also, we have things like config management, data protection, and all the other bits and pieces that we'll be looking in a second in more detail. And well, since we mentioned containers, I would like to kind of do a short stop on the containers and talk a little bit more about why and what is that thing. Well, containers are kind of a more or less standard nowadays with most of the applications. So I don't really need to give you an introduction into containers and say what it actually is. But what it actually brings in this context is this kind of containerized and separated environments where your applications can be installed. So you don't have to install, or you don't have to do this kind of the old way of doing that, where you have to install and manage your applications and provide installation scripts and everything. Now you package them into Docker files, and now they can into Docker containers with Docker files, and then you can move them around as you wish, because then you have a unified experience to deploy those. In addition to that, you have also this thing that, well, in addition to this flexibility of moving it around, you also have this thing that you are also building your system or making it more robust to avoid this thing of a vendor lock-in. So as opposed to deploying to a specific cloud-specific products, here, as in a container, you can just move them around as you wish. And that's also an important thing that plays really well with the whole idea of Anthos, where you move things around. So if you go one level up from containers, and I would like to mention this thing called Cloud Run. What is actually Cloud Run? Well, Cloud Run is, I really like this, the idea. It's basically a serverless experience for developers, and it comes usually two different flavors. So you have this fully managed version of Cloud Run and fully managed version of Knative. So this is basically a Knative initiative that was started by quite a few companies some time ago, and became an open source product. So the managed version of that is Cloud Run, and it runs in two flavors. So you have the fully managed service, where you just deploy your application and you don't have to think about how the application is being managed. So you have fully serverless experience. You have no clusters to manage. You pay as you use the application or as your users are using it. But then it's with Anthos there comes another one, another flavor of that. So you have a Cloud Run for Anthos that run or can run on both on the cloud, but also on your own GKE cluster as well. And with that, you still have the serverless experience for users, but you can also provide things that you will not be able to get on the cloud, most likely. Things like your custom node types. You can have access to various types of accelerators, I don't know, TPUs, GPUs, you know, things like that that fits really well your business, but not really are generally publicly available for absolutely everyone because you have your specific needs. Also, you can access data and stuff on premises easier. So one last thing I would like to mention before we go into dive deeper into different aspects of that is that that thing about declarative system. So declarative system is an important concept here because it's where you kind of declare your state or the state you would like your system to be in, and then the system will kind of try to achieve that state in the background. This is typically opposed to manual, where you have to do everything yourself, which is obviously quite error prone and because we humans, we make mistakes, right? And also you have the programmatic version of that. So you have the programmatic system where you write infrastructure as code and things like that. Here, it will be quite a lot of declarative system using YAML files where you kind of define the states. But I mean, there is also a possibility to do some of those things programmatically as well with APIs and things. All right. I think I will stop here for now, and I'll leave the stage to Janus to do the a bit more deeper dive into this different parts of it. So take it away, Janus.
Yes, thank you, Rostam. Yeah, as Rostam also already mentioned, Anthos consists of a set of tools modernizing your application. We won't be able to cover all of them in this presentation, but here is a subset of services we see as key to provide this simple control experience. So each service you see in this slide can be used isolated depending on your business and technical needs. For example, if you need a platform on which you can run containers on-premise in the same way as you would in cloud, then you can just implement JKE on-premise without having to worry about implementing a service mesh or a policy management tool. The services we have chosen to show here are essential tools for helping you get that single pane of glass for your application. It will give you the speed, agility, and reliability that Michael mentioned earlier in this presentation. For example, you can monitor your on-premise cluster in the same way and in the same place as you monitor your JKE cluster in the cloud. You can see your logs coming from your on-premise JKE cluster into your cloud logging, where you have all the logs collected in one place. So you have this single pane of glass. In the next couple of slides, we will take a deeper dive into some of these services. So on the next slide, we see how Anthos and JKE looks like in the GCP console. On the top image, you can see a screenshot of our in-house implementation of JKE on-premise. Those of you that already worked with the Google Kubernetes engine will notice that the only difference you see in this top image is actually the cluster type, which says Anthos here. And it's actually what it is. It's a regular JKE cluster, just on-premise. You can kubectl into it just like you would in a normal cluster, and you can deploy to it like the normal cluster. Therefore, JKE on-premise is an ideal solution for modernizing your on-premise application that for some reason has to stay on-premise. This could be be due to data regulations saying that data used by this application cannot leave the premise. This way, developers does not have to be concerned about what environment the application should live in. It will always be a Kubernetes cluster. This way, you gain the agility to move this application to the cloud on a later point in time if requirements and regulations change. In the other screenshot, the screenshot below, you see the clear overview you have over the on-premise deployments. You see the services, you can see the ingress, you can see everything that you would expect to see in a regular cluster. So you can also monitor, are they all services up and running? Are there some errors you need to take action on? And you can do this for all your clusters in the same console. This overview is enabled by a managed service called Connect and is deployed inside the cluster. Actually, Connect allows you to connect any of your Kubernetes clusters to Google Cloud. You can do it with the Amazon Kubernetes cluster and couple of it to Google Cloud. So if you have a network that's configured to allow outbound requests, you can establish this encryption connection between your cluster's API server and Google Cloud. So on the next slide, I'll stay on the monitoring part, but now we'll look at how system logs are connected from the JKE on-premise cluster. Again, showing a screenshot from our in-house implementation of JKE. You see how logs from the on-premise cluster flows directly into cloud monitoring platform, just as we would expect from a regular cluster. So cloud monitoring monitors JKE on-premise in a similar way as any other clusters. It offers a fully managed logging solution where you can take metrics, collections, monitoring, dashboard, and alerting. So you always have this complete overview of your cluster. So under the hood, it works by configuring a Stackdriver agent that is deployed inside the cluster. This agent is collecting performance metrics, for example, CPU utilization, memory utilization, and other metadata. For on-premise cluster, this is installed by default, so you don't have to do anything other than deploy your on-premise cluster for this cloud logging to gain the benefit from this. For the next slide. So the two last components addressed how we could monitor our on-premise cluster in a centralized manner. Now we'll look at how we can configure and maintain these clusters spread across on-premise, cloud, also maybe different cloud vendors. For this purpose, Google has developed Anthos Configuration Management, which is a GitOps tool. The core idea of GitOps is having a Git repository that always contains a declarative description of the infrastructure designed in the production environment, along with an automated process to make the production environment match this described state. Normally, in a GitOps environment, there will be two repositories, one for the application code and one for the environment configurations. The application code will contain the application repository will contain the source code of the application, while the environment configuration repository will contain all the configuration for that desired infrastructure. So that will describe what applications and what infrastructure services, what services you need on the infrastructure. That could be a message queue, it could be monitoring tools, a service mesh that we will hear about in a moment. So in this way, you will have all the infrastructure described as code in the Git repository. So there are two ways that you can implement this. The most common one, or the most known one, is the push-based approach, where the application lives inside the application repository. And whenever the application is updated, the build pipeline is triggered, and then the build pipeline will automatically push the new image to the Kubernetes cluster. This means that this CI/CD pipeline has full access to your cluster and thereby have all the passwords to access this cluster. Another way to do this is a pull-based approach, where you actually have an operator living inside the cluster. This will take over the role as a pipeline by continuously comparing the state described in this environment repository. And whenever there is a difference noticed, the operator will automatically update the structure from the inside. And Anthos Configuration Management is the latter, as shown on the diagram. This example shows how an architecture could look like with a repository placed on premise, but it doesn't have to. It could be anywhere. It could also be on GitHub. It could be placed on Google Cloud's own repository service, Google Cloud Repository. Yes, and now I will hand it over to Michael, who will tell us a bit more about Service Mesh.
Thank you, Janus. Anthos Service Mesh is another core component of the Anthos offering. It is based on Istio, an open source service mesh implementation. Anthos Service Mesh is managed Istio, enhancing it with extensions we'll hear about in a few moments, making it the fully managed service mesh for complex microservices architectures. A service mesh is an infrastructure layer that enables managed, observable, and secure communication across your services. It is the connective tissue between your services that adds additional capabilities like traffic control, service discovery, load balancing, resilience, observability, security, and so on. A service mesh implements these cross-cutting concerns without the need for application code to be changed. Some of the service mesh functionality implements the principles of zero trust networks and architectures. These are related to and inspired by Google's Beyond Corp and Beyond Prod approaches, addressing security in a cloud-native environment. The central idea is that the classical perimeter-based security model is not sufficient anymore. This is the model where the world is divided into several zones, for instance, untrusted, demilitarized, internal, and privileged. Once an agent is allowed into a zone, it is trusted to access all services in that zone. Consequently, if this agent is malicious, then the whole zone is compromised. In a zero-trust network architecture, the underlying network is never trusted, and the perimeters are reduced to microperimeters, one around each service. A point-to-point trust model between services is implemented, where each request is accepted or rejected based on trust for devices, users, applications, and traffic. As you can imagine, this requires handling a lot of certificates and policies, constantly changing and scaling up and down. This depends totally on automation, as it cannot be handled manually at this scale and pace. In other words, for a successful modernization, you need to have security that scales. This is one of the central functionalities a service mesh implementation like Istio and Anthos Service Mesh provides. With this, I hand over to Michael to take a detailed look at Anthos Service Mesh.
Thank you so much. Yes, one of the many features that you get from a service mesh is increased observability. And that is what I would like to focus on here. When you run a reliable and high-capacity system without sleepless nights, observability is absolutely vital. That means that, so what does observability mean? The concept covers different types of insight into the performance and health of a system. This is essential as a requirement for proper debugging, of course, once you run into a problem, but also, and I think maybe that's even more important, it's necessary to be able to catch potential problems before they become visible to a consumer. We can get insight into our Anthos deployment in a couple of different ways, and Janus has already touched on the integration between GKE and GKE on-prem and the well-known observability tools in GCP, such as logging and metrics. I would like to focus now on something that is entirely new to Anthos, namely the observability and control features that the Anthos Service Mesh provides. This provides a single entry point for getting a high-level overview over central measures for the service in your deployment. It gives you insight into the performance of your system, for example, how much traffic is running through the different services and how high is the latency. Furthermore, the concept of service level objectives is also integrated into the service mesh interface. And what that means, I'll show in just a few moments. But since you can also easily see whether your services are running on encrypted traffic, you get an impression of the security profile of your deployment. And finally, you also get access to a visual representation of how all your different services are related. On the next slide, we'll see an example of this. This is the first half of some of what you get with this service mesh dashboard. It gives us a high-level overview of the health and performance of our complete solution. And I think what is important to emphasize here is that all this comes without any additional instrumentation of the applications that you run. You don't configure anything in particular. There are some things you configure in the interface through APIs for when you have an incident, but you don't have to change any of your code. Well, the first thing that catches our eye here on the dashboard is the incident timeline at the top. This lets us know whether there have been any incidents of a given severity within a defined timeline. So what does that mean, an incident? Well, some years ago, Google published these two books on site reliability engineering, one conceptual and one more practical. And there we can learn about the concepts of service level indicators, or SLIs for short, and service level objectives, SLOs for short. A service level indicator is a parameter by which you can tell whether your application is healthy. An obvious example is the response latency of a service. Based on that, you can then define a service level objective. You use that to define what performance you require from your service in order to deliver the quality that you promise the consumer of the service. So that is the objective that your service needs to live up to. These concepts are part of the Anthos Service Mesh interface, and this means that it is very simple for you to configure SLOs that reflect your particular application. The system will then keep a track on how the performance develops, and it will let you know when a service approaches non-compliance with its SLO or when it becomes non-compliant. And that is what we see on the second pane on the slide here, that there is one service that is red. It has broken its service level objective, and 4 that are trending towards breaking their SLOs. And what we get here is very direct and very actionable information that it is incredibly easy to configure. And of course, needless to say, this would be more than just non-trivial to implement if we had to do all this ourselves. On the next slide, we see the other half of kind of the overview of this this service mesh dashboard. And what we see here is that we get some information about some vital metrics about your whole system. You get information about the level of error rates you have. You get information about the latency throughout the whole system. And then you get information about the level of traffic that you are running at any time. Furthermore, down in the left corner, there is a small overview of how many of your services run authenticated, unauthenticated, or a combination of the two, traffic between each other, which means how many of your services are running encrypted, how many are not. This is important for your security configuration. And finally, we have a little overview of the so-called service topology, which we'll see in the next slide. Well, get a little bit more into that. So what we see here is kind of the same, just in full. And here on the topology dashboard, we can see that all the services, we can see all the services that are included in the service mesh, but also how they are connected. And we can get information about the Kubernetes workloads that lie behind each service, and we can even drill down to the level of pods and containers to see more details about the software or the containers that provide our services. When we click on a specific service, we also get information about the performance and health of that particular service, as you see on the right in the screenshot. There we see that there is an indication of the level of traffic that it runs, the error rate that it has, and also the latency along some of the most important percentiles. we cannot see this in this picture, but you can actually also get a comparison of the topology, that is the relation between the services at 2 different points in time. So you can say, how did my graph of services look like a week ago compared to how does it look today after we made this big change in our configuration last Tuesday? And that can be very useful too. I just here want to highlight a good point that is made in the Zero Trust Networks book that has already been highlighted, that it says that the first and maybe the most important step towards a Zero Trust network is to get a general overview of the solution included and the solution run with a system diagram. And we get that, of course, with the Anthos Service Mesh, but we also get a lot of additional and very powerful observability tools that enable us to follow recommended site reliability engineering best practices all right out of the box. And that is incredibly powerful. With that, I will pass the word to my colleague Janus to talk about some of our own experiences in Competence with Anthos so far.
Yes, thank you, Michael. So through implementation of Anthos, both at customers, but also internal in Competence, we have gained some knowledge and thoughts that we would like to share with you in this presentation. So on the next slide. Yes. One of the key highlights we think are important with Anthos is, as we mentioned earlier, Anthos consists of different individual services which can be implemented on its own. This meaning that you can use JKE Connect on any cluster, doesn't have to be a Kubernetes cluster. We have created an Amazon cluster in, funny enough, Amazon, and use JKE Connect to actually connect this cluster to GCP. And this gives you the unified overview of your clusters. So you don't have to use JKE on-premise. You don't have to use the service mesh. You can take each part you think will benefit from your business needs. So in the same way, if you have the other need for a tool to centrally manage your cluster configuration across environments, you can use Anthos Configuration Management. And of course, as Michael already mentioned, the service mesh is an upcoming feature to connect clusters across clouds and on-premise. This will enable the advanced holistic view and security you might need in the organization. On the next slide, we see some of the reasons why customers have chosen Anthos, chosen to try out Anthos. We have already touched on a few of them. The primary one would be data cannot leave the on-premise. So the developers should develop the applications in the same way. They don't want to develop in one way to run the application on-premise, and then if it by any chance should be moved to the cloud, then it should be redesigned. It should be developed in the same way from the beginning. And then, of course, moving your applications to containers where you can maybe not avoid, but you can minimize the vendor logins. So in our experience, is this simply plug and play? Not quite yet. You need to plan ahead if when it comes to implementation of Anthos. And it's heavily on the network you should think ahead, because you need to make some decisions. Should this run on a closed network inside the application, inside the organization without access to the internet, or should it be exposed where maybe services can be called from the internet? And also, things to think about is should it be connected with the clusters running in the cloud? If so, then you need to design the network topology so you don't have network overlaps. And all of those kind of things you need to think of before you implement Anthos on-premise or JKE on-premise. And what we also experienced is Anthos is a product that's maturing very fast. You can see that especially on the documentation, you can find a lot of documentation that are kept up to date all the time. So you always have a place to go if you see something out of the ordinary while you are using JKE on-premise or other Anthos products. Yes, on the next slide, we will touch briefly on how to get started with Anthos. There are many resources that can help you get started and learn more of them. But one thing I want to highlight is the Competence Anthos Discovery Workshop. So Competence offers an Anthos Discovery Workshop, a one-day workshop that helps evaluate whether Anthos fits into your technology strategy and what it can mean for your business. Customers will learn about Anthos and how to get started with it. So we will guide how to get started, who to contact, and stuff like that. And we will work together to identify the use case and explore business opportunities where Anthos can play a vital part. And now I want to hand it over to Michael, who will wrap up this presentation.
Yes, thank you, Janus. So, yes, let's try to wrap up what we have been through so far. In the beginning of the webinar, Michael Gefeller introduced a number of essential and strategic needs in the modern IT solutions. He emphasized speed as one of the most important keywords, both in terms of our ability to push changes to our solutions, to get to market as quickly as possible, but also to be able to scale fluidly as our solution grows and we have success. But we don't want to just be fast for the sake of it, as he said. We want to be fast in order to be able to change and adapt fast. This enables us to be agile and move and adapt our solutions to the needs that arise while things are changing. But while we keep speed as the core value across different levels of our solution, we cannot compromise on essential business requirements. Such requirements are the need to uphold a high level of security and a high level of compliance with all relevant regulation. But also we need to deliver a solution that our customers, of course, find to be highly reliable and that maintains a level of resilience against the different kinds of failures that occur in big distributed systems. From the perspective of technology, Google has then, with this quotation that Rustam took forward, Google predicts that in order to achieve such ambitious strategic goals, the current and the coming top-tier solutions will run in containerized microservices. It will be managed through a declarative system with a single control experience and an entry point for observability. They also predict that this can best be done applying a service mesh, and often it will involve applications across different locations. But this is when the hard part comes in, because of course configuring and setting up such a scalable multi-location system that enables truly native microservice architectures is really, really hard. So far, we have given some insights and details on how Anthos enables us to run such solutions through a single control experience. We have shown how the Anthos Configuration Manager gives us a single declarative solution to the configuration of an IT solution. And we have shown how the GCP console provides a single pane of glass for viewing our solution from different perspectives. The GKE interface gives you access to all your clusters in the same interface, while the GCP observability features gives you access to all the logs and metrics. We have also showed how the Anthos Service Mesh gives us some new powerful tools and insights into the health and performance of our solutions. Finally, we have shared some of our own experience with Anthos, as well as many of the included technologies that it is composed of. So, of course, we hope that so far this has been useful to all of you. To gauge your interest now and how you respond to this, we would like to close off this webinar before we go to the questions with a short poll. So we would like to know how many of you would be interested in a more technical session on how to actually set up and run Anthos. So you are welcome to answer the question now. And I'll just leave a little bit more time. I see that someone's still voting. Okay. Well, everyone who voted said that they would be interested in some follow-up technical information. That's very, very good. I think we'll move on to Q&A.
Yes, I think we'll do that. Thank you very much to all of you for doing this, and also for you to listening in. And we have so far we have 2 questions for now in a backlog, but you're more than welcome to send in more as we are answering the first ones. So start typing while I'm reading up the questions. So the first question is, can you still keep on the on-prem logs and all at the on-prem deployment? Is there a monitoring component to look at those those on-prem logs? Who wants to answer that question?
I can take a first stab at it at least. So it continues. I'm thinking here that if you have apps that should remain on-prem, the logs usually are sensitive enough to keep them also on-prem. Well, yes. So Janus, you correct me if I'm off here, but by default, when you install a GKE on-premise cluster, the monitoring features are enabled, but it is simple to just disable them, and then nothing will go out of your cluster. That means that you won't get any sensitive logs into GCP. There is, as I see it, kind of also another half to this question, which is, well, what if we also want to use the logs for something specific inside our cluster that doesn't necessarily involve the GCP interface? And of course, if regardless of whether you enable exporting your observability metrics to the GCP console, you can still use it for whatever you want to inside your on-premise system. I don't know if you want to follow up anything, Janus, maybe.
Yeah, that's completely right. By default, I think Stackdriver is sending system logs and performance logs by default. But yeah, you can use Grafana, Prometheus to actually expand this log experience. So yeah.
All right.
Agree.
Thank you very much. Yep, that's a great question, great answers. Thank you. So we have another very interesting question. Can Anthos manage other than Kubernetes cloud resources, things like disk, DNS, VMs, and etc.?
I guess that depends on what we lie in. If Anthos can handle VMs, if it's for the service mesh part, then I think Michael maybe knows something about the VMs. But if you talk Anthos as a product and you have the JKE on premise, then you can use JKE on premise as a regular cluster, but you can also attach VMs to the service mesh. Correct me if I'm wrong, Michael.
Yes, well, there is this one component we haven't talked about, which is called migrate for Anthos, which is also part of Anthos. Managing VMs, you can include, I think that's in an upcoming release, VMs in an Anthos service mesh, but that does not mean it is managed. That these become managed. When it concerning DNS and the other things that were mentioned, there are other services in the platform and not directly managed by Anthos.
Fantastic. So another question was, okay, so here it goes. Am I correct to understand that Anthos solution provides generic way of management, logging, debugging applications among several Kubernetes clusters?
Yes, I think that would be the short answer to this. Solution provides generic way of managing, logging, debugging applications among several Kubernetes clusters. I think that sounds like an accurate description.
Yep, it looks good to me as well. So yes, that's the short version of an answer. You're more than welcome to kind of ask it a bit more in detail if we did not answer correctly, or if you're not really satisfied with the answer. That goes to all questions. So another question that I kind of see going through quite often at this kind of sessions is that, would my old custom Kubernetes on-prem would it be supported? My old custom Kubernetes cluster. Who wants to take a stab on that one?
Well, you can include some of the Anthos components into the cluster. So, for instance, that you can make it visible in the GCP console, and you can also use Anthos Config Management in any well-behaved cluster, but this cluster won't become managed. So you can connect it using GKE Connect. We have done that using a cluster generated by COPS in AWS, I think, and then it shows up in the Google console, and you get the information from this cluster. And you can easily use Anthos Config Management as well in any cluster.
Yeah, and also, I mean, if at some point you might want to consider migration, I guess, right? If possible.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So what else we have here? I got also a tip from some sources right now in the comments field saying that sooner this year we will be announcing, we as in Google, not we, but the Google will be announcing Anthos and bare metal as well. So that is also an interesting thing to have in to have it in the backs of your heads. Thank you for that tip as well. So that's a really good good news, I think, for all of us. Any other questions? I think I'm at the bottom of the question list for now. And if there is nothing coming in a few next seconds while I'm trying to kind of drag on time, I think I will. Yep.
So I'm just thinking. I see that Alejandro Montenegro from Google may have some input on this. So maybe we should just give him a minute or two just to give an extra comment on some of the things that we have been around.
Yeah, that would be great. Can we make this possible? Can we
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can. Perfect.
Great. So first of all, thank you for the presentation, guys. I just wanted to add for some of the questions, right, respect to our approach, right, with respect to covering more and more different kind of environment, right? So we saw today we run on VMware, right, as on-prem. We want to go on bare metal. We have the possibility to use GKE Connect also, right, to connect any existing generic Kubernetes that you have deployed, either with Ranger, either do it by yourself, either with OpenShift, right? as long as you have a Kubernetes cluster that exposes the APIs, right, we can connect to that run, right? And we have built a very smooth mechanism how we connect it, right? So it doesn't require huge configuration of the networking to enable that, right? But basically it's a agent that you deploy on your Kubernetes cluster, and with that, then it connects into the Google Cloud Console. And this gives you this consolidated view, right? And that's especially interesting when we're seeing customers that we're working with that have 200, 400 clusters, right, in different environments. And you have to manage policies, right? How do you ensure that the right roles are applied to every single cluster? How do you ensure that no administrator goes in and change some of the policies, right? And that's where Anthos Config Management is so relevant, right? That you really can have this single pane glass, right, of management, deployment of your Kubernetes cluster. So that we also try to embrace open source as much as possible from third parties, right? And we have a very interesting marketplace for Anthos and Kubernetes in general to deploy many different kind of open source offerings, be it a Cassandra database, being a Mongo database, be it GitLab, Redis, etc., right? We have more, I think, almost 100 different third-party open source software available to by click, basically deploy them on your clusters, which is also super interesting. And those open source providers are responsible for administrating that and all consolidating, even with one single billing if you have to pay for any kind of support to those third parties. So that's, I think, also is very interesting for many. That's my 2 cents for now. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. I think it was very insightful and good feedback, and well, and information to all of us, I think. So I haven't seen any questions. Oh yeah, well, there is one question. Perfect. Last question. Can Anthos help in moving workloads from on-prem to cloud GKE?
Am I allowed to take this one also?
Of course.
So the whole idea of Anthos is actually to understand where is the customer today, right? Respecting that the customer has done a big investment already on-prem, right? Helping them to make it easier to transition from existing application on-prem to the cloud, right? And that's what we want to give you, the possibility to have the same cloud experience on your on-prem, right? So you can start migrating your existing application using best practices with guys like Computers can guide you on that, right? How you start decomposing, for example, your existing legacy application and put it on top of a Kubernetes cluster running on-prem. And later on, when you feel confident that the migration has been completed, then you can move it to the cloud if you think that's the right things to do, right? Thanks.
Thank you very much. All right, I think there are no more new questions coming in, and I think we will say thank you again for listening in, and thank you for great, fantastic, awesome questions, and also have a great day. In case you have any questions or would like to contact anyone, we're showing some contact information on the screen. Please don't, if there's anything, don't hesitate to contact us. Thank you very much for today, and have a great day. Bye-bye.